Hey everyone, John here. Welcome back to another tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at how I used Continuum, Sapphire, Mocha Pro, and for the first time, Silhouette. I finally included Silhouette into my workflow, and I want to show you how I've used all of these tools to take this shot from looking okay to fantastic using BorisFX's suite of tools. So let's jump in. So here's the original shot, and if we have a look, you can see the camera dollies in, just sort of hangs there for a moment, and then dollies back out again. So quite a big sort of sweeping 3D motion there, and in order to place anything in 3D, we're going to have to do a 3D camera solve. And I did that using Mocha Pro. So if we just go into Mocha Pro, I'm just going to walk you through the broad steps with this because we have a range of tutorials on our YouTube channel that already walk through this step by step. So if we take a look at the shot, her movement is going to mess up the 3D camera solve. So in order to mask her out, I've used Matte Assist ML. I'll just turn that off and just quickly walk through this. So in order to create a quick matte, come up and choose the Create New Mask ML tool. Click on the head and click on the body. She's a little trickier because she's holding a guitar. Maybe click on the legs and probably just on the neck of the guitar. Come up and select the Pick tool to create the first spline. It's going to hide those handles. Come down to the Matte tab, turn on Generate Object Matte under Matte Assist ML. And for her, I used a dilation of 10, just to make sure that everything was covered and then we didn't have any movement that would affect the 3D solve. So I'm just going to turn that off and turn this back on. And that's the matte that was generated. So with that matte created, come over to the Camera Solve tab and just making sure that I click this button here to make sure this is used as a mask, so it won't affect the 3D camera solve, and clicking on Solve. And the result that I got, if I just turn on 3D, was this. All of the flowers have been tracked. And the result was pretty good, 1.27, not too bad. Generally, you want to go below 1, but this was good enough. So that did a really good job. So with that done, just saved. I'm not going to save because I've already done that. And just for now, I'm going to just delete my camera. And under the 3D camera data settings, I'm going to click on Create 3D Data. Now, this is going to create a lot of 3D nulls. I could have easily turned those off inside of Mocha Pro and just selected one that I wanted to import. But for now, I'm just going to just grab one that's fairly close to the back here. And I'm going to just lock that. Control L. Select everything. There's a lot of them in here. I'm just going to deselect the footage and the camera and delete. So I only want one. And I need that one in order to be able to place the text in here in a semi-accurate position. And with that selected, if I just hit U, you can see what's been keyframed. We don't need to keyframe this. I'm just going to turn those all off. And I just want to reset these. I want to make these 0. That'll make sure that the text is aligned correctly. So very quickly, what I did, just create some new text. I thought Bloom was quite a good name for this. Maybe it's the name of the artist or name of the new album. I'm just going to quickly scale this up manually like this. And just quickly press Alt Home to bring that back to the middle. Okay, make that 3D. And it's going to disappear. If we have a look at the top, we can see, where's the camera? There's a camera down there. And the text is kind of in the right place, but we still can't see it. So you could manually drag it into position, but I'm just going to, so you can just bring it up like that. But I'm going to just grab the parent pick whip and shift select that null. And that's going to put it right on that null. So now if I just scale this text up, you can see it's going to be in pretty much the right position. So that's generally how I like to position things in 3D space in After Effects. So with the camera solve done, and the text in the correct 3D position, the next stage was to give the text some 3D extrusion and add an environment light and some other lights to help it feel more integrated into the scene. So I'll go into Comp 2 for that. And just a quick note, I've actually broken this down into individual compositions just to make it a little easier to understand the different steps, just to make that a bit clearer. Okay, so here's the text, and you can see it's got an extrusion. I've given it this sort of pinky color, just by sampling a color from the flowers. I'm not going to change that now. And if we just hit U twice on the keyboard, it's got a convex bevel, a little bit of a bevel depth, and just these various settings here. You can take a look. And something that I was able to do in this particular look that I wasn't able to do in previous versions of After Effects was to use the footage as an environment map with an environment light, which is really useful. Previously, you could only use HDRs, but now it's more flexible. So if I turn on the environment light, it goes quite dark, but you can see we're starting to get some reflections here on the sides. And I'll just press U with the environment light. And you can see under light options under source, I've chosen footage. So we're using the footage layer as the environment, and we get this little environment icon there. And why that's good is because not only is it picking up the color of the footage, on which it's overlaid, but it's also picking up some of the movement. We're getting some movement in the sides of the text, like that. You can see how that is actual movement there. So I really like that new feature. It's nice to be able to more realistically integrate 3D into 2D shots by using that shot as the environment map. Very nice. But it's quite dark at the back. That's because you can see I've rotated the light. If we take it back to 0, it's a little dark there. And I've just rotated a little bit. If I go too far, we're going to blow out the front a little bit. And I wasn't quite getting the look that I wanted. It's a little blotchy, a little patchy. So I'm just going to undo that. I chose 87 degrees there just to give me a lot of value in the sides of the text, but I've used other lights to light the front of the text. So we've got a parallel light key. Just turn that on. So that's going to light it from the left-hand side, and we've got a parallel light fill, just filling in some of those darker areas on the right-hand side. And let me just solo the footage again. Remember, we've got these two spotlights here. So I wanted to kind of replicate those with After Effects lights by using a parallel light blue spot left and blue spot right. So if we turn those on and turn the text back on, so now we're getting a bit of a blue spot, a bit of a blue reflection in the sides of the text on both sides because we're using two lights. Turn those off and it's just pink. And of course, these are 3D lights. I've just moved them up into the approximate position. They're not right on, but just moved them up into around the right area to give us the general effect. So that's definitely looking better, but it's still very dark behind the text. So for this, I thought some kind of LED screen might look good. And for that, I've turned to both Sapphire and Continuum. So I'll just close up O2, and here in O3, which I've got a proxy enabled here, you can see I've got this reasonably subtle LED screen in the background. Just turn off that proxy, and let's take a look at the effects I used. So I've used 3 effects. Well, when I say 3 effects, because I've used Sapphire S Effect, I've used a lot more than 3 effects. Let's take a look. If we just click on Edit Effect to load Sapphire Effect Builder, and I've just used a preset here. Often I'll turn to presets as my starting point to save me time. You can see it's a reasonably complex setup here. We've got S Laser Beam, S Shake, S Warp Vortex, S-Raise, S-Distort, S-Layer, and S-Ultra Glow, all making up this look. And this was created by Ben. I've actually made some adjustments so it doesn't look super, impressive with those adjustments because I wanted something fairly subtle. But if we just click on Load S-Effect, open up the preset browser, I've actually made this a favorite. This is the effect here. This is VJ Light Swirls Background. And this was created by Ben. So this was perfect for me. I literally just grabbed that and just turned a few things down because I didn't want it to be too blown out for my particular look. I'm going to cancel that and cancel. And to give it that realistic LED look, I've used Continuum's BCC Plus Super LED. We just roll in here a little bit and turn that on. That gives me that video screen look. You can see it is actually going over the flowers, but we'll fix that up later. And finishing off with a little bit of Sapphire Ultra Glow to give that sort of pinky smoky glow. And I've done this in so many of my looks and in my tutorials. I've turned on the atmosphere setting just to give it that smoky look because, she's in a club or I guess at a concert. I guess there's not too many people smoking these days inside, of course. But maybe this is dry ice, okay? So maybe there's some dry ice. And that little bit of smokiness just gives it a little bit of volume, a little bit of depth, and just a little bit of interest. And speaking of depth, I've just made that layer 3D and just moved that back on the Z-axis just so that it sits behind the text. And of course, being a 3D layer, it responds to the movement of the camera. So the next stage was to add some particles, and for this I've used particle illusion. And this not only adds extra depth to the scene, it also enhances the flower theme because these are falling petals. And to create this look here in Comp 4, I've used two particle illusion layers, one in the background and another one in the foreground, just moved forward in Z-space. And why have I done that? Well, particle illusion is a 3D particle generator. And when you're using the particle illusion cameras, the built-in cameras, you can use depth of field, and it has some great looks. But I'm using the After Effects camera, and currently there's no depth of field. So I wanted to fake that look by having some particles in the foreground blurred out and the ones in the background not blurred. So that's why I've used two layers. So let's just solo the background one first. I'm just going to click to launch particle illusion. I've just used a preset again. And let me just zoom in a little bit here. There we go. So you can see my emitter there. If I just drag the time indicator, you can see the emitter's moving because it's the camera that has the motion. So I have Use Comp Camera turned on in After Effects, and that's reflected here inside particle illusion. So we've got these beautiful falling petals. For that, I've just used a petal preset. It was Rose Petals 401. You can see it's written here on the node, on the emitter node. And these have a red color, but I've just used a pink gradient just to make it match the pink flowers in the scene. And looking quite natural. You can see there is some motion blur. Let me just cancel that. And here in After Effects, you can see Use Comp Camera is checked. And under Particle Properties, I've set motion blur to use host settings, in this case, After Effects only. And the layers motion blur checkbox is checked. And that gives us these beautiful organic falling petals. Now, the ones in the foreground, there's slightly fewer. Just decrease the number slightly. And to just fake the depth of field, I've used Sapphire's Rack Defocus effect. So with and without, you can see that there. With the Sapphire Rack Defocus. And together they add some nice depth and really enhance the theme of flowers and blooming. All right, so obviously the big problem now is that the guitarist is in the background. We need to cut the guitarist out and bring them in front of everything. And in the past, I would have used After Effects' Roto Brush tool with a bit of sort of matte cleanup. And when BorisFX introduced Matte Assist ML, I started using Matte Assist ML. And recently in Silhouette 2025.5, with the Mask ML, Matte Assist ML, and new Edge Refine ML tools, I've found my new weapon of choice. Let's take a look. What I'll do is I'll I'll walk you through the steps that I took because it's really quick. So we'll do it step by step. So let me just launch Silhouette. This is the After Effects version of Silhouette, of course, but there is a full standalone version as well. Obviously, it's a very seasoned roto app for very precise rotoscoping, and I'm yet to dig into those tools. But I wanted to show you what I was excited about, especially if you've never used Silhouette before, because you can see how easy it is to integrate into your workflow. If I just click on the magnifying glass, I want mask ML, so I'm going to click and drag that in. Make sure it's connected. All right. And all I do is come over and make a selection. So I'm going to click on her head, click on her body, just click around until I've got a pretty good selection. Very similar to the Matte Assist ML selection process that we saw before. So that's my first keyframe. Now I could just drop a Matte Assist ML node in straight away, but I might just give it a little bit more to work with. So I'll come to the middle and just create a keyframe in this general area and maybe come to the end and just add one in here. Just like that. Okay, so now I'm going to do a search for Matte Assist ML. And there it is there. Click and drag and drop that on. And I'm going to connect Mask ML to Matte Assist ML. And down here under reference frames, I'm going to change that from frame to keyframes because we're going to use the keyframes from Mask ML. And we'll just take a look at that. You can see it's done a pretty great job. If there was any areas where I felt that I needed to fill it in, if there were some holes, it's looking pretty good. All I would have to do is come back to my Mask ML node and create a new keyframe there, just like we did for these keyframes. Now, what I'm really excited about is Refine Matte ML because the hair is looking okay, but it's a bit crunchy. So let's do a search for Refine Matte Refine ML. I'm even still getting used to the name. And drop that in. And what I'll do is I'll come up and I will take a look at that on white. I might want to just bring in the edges a little bit so I can adjust that, just shrink that, say by -2. And just add a little bit of blur so I can make some minor adjustments to it. And that's ready to go. So I'm going to cancel that. So I got that cut out quick as a flash. And the only other enhancement that I made was to use a little bit of BCC plus light wrap. Just turn that off. So that's the result out of Silhouette. And you can see that's just picking up a bit of the pink from the text behind and it's wrapping it around the talent. So inside BCC plus light wrap, you can see as the background, I've chosen Bloom. Okay. And what that's doing is wrapping a little bit of that color around the talent and helping that feel a little better integrated. Now, the reason I didn't comp the text with the background and use the background as the background was because this LED is fairly dark and I don't think it would have made a lot of difference. But I thought that this fairly bright, pink text would be picked up in the edges of the talent. That's why I did that. And the other layer, of course, is the flowers. If we just quickly go into Silhouette, and here I've used exactly the same technique as I did with the talent, starting with Mask ML, clicking on the flowers to create the green dots, also right-clicking on the talent just to make sure they don't get selected, and following that with Matte Assist ML, and following that with Matte Refine ML. And there's a couple of flowers missing in there. I think I've only actually added one, or there's a couple of keyframes in there. If I wanted to add, for example, if there's a couple of flowers missing, I could create new keyframes just by left-clicking. This takes a few more clicks to select. Just make sure I get those extra ones in there. little bit of the guitar in there. So once again, right click and just one more for good measure there. So that creates an extra keyframe. And because that's linked into the Matte Assist by choosing keyframes for reference frames, that gets picked up. And then the Matte Refine will refine that even further. We've got a bit more of that flower, but it's not 100%, but it's pretty close. And I also tried like luma matting and other different techniques for this, and this was the best result for me. Okay, so I'm just going to close that up. So that's how I've started integrating Silhouette's new ML tools into my workflow. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but it's definitely all I need for this kind of shot to sell it effectively. If I did need to go in and do more adjustment, then Silhouette has all the tools to do that for very precise rotoscoping. All right, so let's finish this off now and take a look at how I added the last couple of effects. And earlier on the footage, we saw that there's these spotlights, one on the right and one on the left in the scene. This one just over here. And I did put the parallel lights around that area to light the text, but I thought a couple of sapphire lens flares would really enhance this. And for that, I've used lens flare auto track. And if I was to apply lens flare auto track directly to this shot without first isolating those spotlights, then I'd have lens flares all over the place where there's bright areas. So for this, I've used Mocha Pro. Let's just take a quick look inside Mocha Pro. And I've used Matte Assist ML, again with the dilated matte. And I've also just created a quick mask here just to mask off the flowers. So we end up with this. And back here in After Effects, I just solo that layer and turn off that. You can see I've created a matte. So now all we have is the spotlights in the scene. So that allows lens flare auto track to do its job. So if I just turn that on, there we go. I've got this set to flare only. Let me just turn off the checkerboard. And you see they're much nicer, right? We've got these beautiful detailed lens flares. And they're not 3D, but because they're auto tracking those bright spotlights, they feel like they're 3D. They're moving as if they're part of the scene. But of course, I can put them on top of everything, so they can sit up above everything. And they also have occlusion. And for occlusion, I've set the text as the occlusion layer. So even though the lens flare is above the text in the layer stacking order, because it's being used as the occlusion layer, we get this kind of look. As it moves over the lens flare, it occludes it. And when it moves away from it, it reveals the lens flare. Really nice. Now, the only other thing I've done in here is to use the soft focus effect from Sapphire, S soft focus, and a bit of S ultra glow. Let me just turn those both off. So that's without. It's looking a little bit flat. But first of all, a bit of soft focus to add a bit of a blooming effect. And that also brightens up the shot. You can see if I twirl that open, that I've increased the brightness and just actually crushed the blacks a little bit by adjusting the offset darks. So it's given us a bit more contrast. So a touch of soft focus and a bit of extra blooming using S Ultra Glow. And that gives it a really nice sort of soft, dreamy look, especially on these foreground flowers. And the only other thing that I think this needed was the text to me looked a little bit clean. So I wanted to borrow a little bit of grain from the shot and add that to the text and also put it slightly out of focus. And in order to be able to apply the effects to the text, in this case, I've pre-composed the text. So I've put all the lights, the text, a duplicate of the camera and the footage for the environment map into that comp, and that allows me in this comp to apply effects to it. So I've used Sapphire Rack Defocus to give it a little bit of a out of focus look, bit of depth of field there, and BCC's Match Grain effect, just to add the grain. And in order to get the grain to match the footage, I've chosen for my sample controls, sample layer, footage. And here's the final look again. So the combination of Continuum, Sapphire, Mocha Pro, and Silhouette really helped me out in making this shot just look a little bit better. In the next tutorial, we'll take a look at this setup, and this is also using Mocha Pro to do a 3D camera solve and Silhouette to cut out the talent. But I've used some other effects in here as well, so I look forward to presenting that to you in the next tutorial. To learn more about all of the products I've talked about today, be sure to visit borisfx.com, where you can also download a free trial. For now, this is John. See you in the next tutorial.